All right, it is time to talk reading goals. Yes, the time has finally come. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm here to finally share with you my 2019 reading goals. I know it's a bit late in the game to be doing this, not only in February, but like in mid-February, but it took me this long to figure out what I wanted to do this year, so yeah, it just sort of took a bit of a longer time. And this year is going to be a little bit different. Last year I decided to do some sort of tick box checklist goals and also some move in this direction and see what happens types of goals. But for this year, I think I am going to go back to tick boxes, and I have actually just what I'm going to do is work on projects. I am going to work. I have tons of different book and reading projects that I am working on, explorations that I have created, and I have new projects that I am starting this year. So I am just going to be assigning a numeric value to each of the different projects and work towards reading that many books in each of the projects. So in some ways, I feel like this may not be all that interesting, but hopefully it is. And whether it's interesting or not, it is what I decided to do. So yeah. So for some of these projects I'm going to, for each of the projects, I will just briefly describe what it's about, and I will leave links below for a lot of these have their own playlists and or GoodReads lists or GoodReads groups and those kinds of things. So I'll leave links below for all of the things that I mentioned. And yeah, so let's just get this started. So first up, the oldest project I have from this channel, and it's actually an exploration. There's no end date for this. I don't anticipate reading all of the books on this list because it's over 400, but I have been working my way through them, and that is the Shannon Reads Those Books exploration, and I started this back in 2014. At the time, I was reading lots of lighter reads, lots of easier reads, and I was trying to find my feet again in terms of what I wanted to read, and I also wanted to increase my reading comprehension, and I wanted to read books that were like influential and highly referenced or zeitgeist. So I put a list together of, I think it was 5 different book lists of all of those kinds of things, whether they were classics, modern classics, zeitgeist, titles that are referenced again and again, or just titles that everyone seems to have read, and I put them all together in this big list, and I've been working my way through it ever since. So since then, I have read a total of 43 books for this exploration, and it has been really interesting. I haven't been doing as well on it in the past couple of years because I keep on adding more projects, and last year I only read 6 titles, but I did enjoy some of them. I don't enjoy all of the titles I read, but I have really tackled some really challenging works. Like, I think for me, reading War and Peace was like the big one. Like, I just feel like after that, I feel like I can read anything. So that was in and of itself a wonderful thing. And there's been so many wonderful books, finally reading all of The Diviners by Margaret Lawrence, which is a Canadian title. Like, my goodness gracious, it's like one of my top 5 books of all time. So, but not all of them do I love, and not all of them are super challenging. There's plays in there, there's kids books in there, there's teen books in there. So it's been a really interesting process, and I do hope to be more actively working on it this year. One of the challenges is that they do take longer to read. Each text usually takes me a month to read. So for this year, I am hoping to read 6 books for this exploration, although that's not a huge number, hopefully they will make a big impact on me. I don't know. So 6 books for those books. Next up is my sci-fi, fantasy, and weird exploration. This is a project that I started in 2016 when I recognized that I feel like I enjoy science fiction and fantasy, but I noticed I wasn't reading a lot of science fiction and fantasy. So again, I put together a bunch of different lists of iconic, popular, best-selling, well-loved zeitgeist science fiction titles, science fiction, fantasy, and weird titles. Weird was new to me, and it is still pretty new to me, although I've read all of Lovecraft, so I think I got some weird covered, which was one of the biggest things that I did for this project. But yeah, so for this one, I have read 24 titles so far, it's just shy of 200, I think. But last year I only read 2. So I got to up my game on this one a bit. And for this year, I would like to read at least 6 titles. And from that, I would like to read at least 2 science fiction, 2 fantasy, and 2 weird, where one is like legit weird, like China Medieval title, and one is like anything else, whether it's speculative fiction or horror or urban fantasy or any kind of mashup between different genres. So that is the goal for my sci-fi, fantasy, and weird exploration. Next up is one of the projects I think people are the most familiar with, and I do love doing this one. I started it back in 2017, and it is my TBR Unwrapping projects. So this is where you take all of your unread books and you wrap them up. I color-coded them by genre or project, and then you unwrap them and then you read them. And so for this project, I have had bumpy bits on this a little bit, mostly because I didn't realize I don't only read my own physical books. Like, my reading also encapsulates library books, Kindle books, I buy more books. So my progress on this one has been a bit slower than I anticipated, but it's actually not going that bad. I have, since 2017, I've read 43 books, and last year I read 24 books for this project. So I'm actually doing pretty good on this one, and my goal for this year is 40 books, which is a lot, but it's the number I chose, so I gotta get to unwrapping. I actually have 7 unwrapped books right now, that one of which I'm almost done, but I need to do a new unwrapping soon. So, and my goal for this year is not to have more than 10 unwrapped at any one time. So that's a new goal that I'm adding to that particular project. So it is a lot of fun, and I do really enjoy doing it. Next up is a very specific challenge, one of my most specific challenges for the year, and that is my 2019 book to film challenge. I have been reading book to film adaptations as a sort of annual challenge since 2010. And I haven't talked about one specifically on this channel for several years. I think 2015 was the last time I did like it as a structured challenge. But once I realized that this is just something I do, I figured I might as well just share what it is. So I picked, for this particular year, I picked 12 titles that are being adapted to film, and most of them are far-reaching like adaptations, like not super near future. They're sort of more in the announced stage or the pre-production stage. So because I like to read them well in advance of trailers or casting and any of those things. So, but this one is very specific. So I picked 12 books. I want to read those 12 books. I have done a video about this, and yeah, so I am looking forward to it. I love book to film adaptations. It's a fun thing to do. It's a fun thing to follow, and I am really enjoying it so far. So the next one is a new challenge that I'm doing this year, and this is to read the oldest books on my GoodReads to be read shelf, or my a real want to read shelf, because I have 2 separate shelves. So this one I think I've alluded to a few times, and what I have decided to do, I noticed recently that next February 2020, will be the 10-year anniversary of me joining GoodReads. So I went back and looked on my TBR shelf, or my A Real Want to Read shelf, and looked at the books that I added that first day that I joined GoodReads, and there's still a lot of them that I haven't gotten to. And I thought it might be a fun challenge to try and read them before my 10-year GoodReads anniversary. So it's a fair amount of titles. It's actually 25 titles. I called it from 28 to 25, but it's 25 titles of particular books, and then there's an additional 8 books that are sort of like prerequisite rereading type of things, because some of the books on this list are books in series, or I haven't actually read the series for a long time, so I would like to reread the series up until the book that's on the list. So this one I think is going to be a lot of fun. I hope it's going to be a lot of fun, and there actually are a fair amount of titles on this particular list that hit a lot of the other marks too, that are book to film adaptations, that are on those books list, that are on my sci-fi, fantasy, and weird list. There's actually even a couple of titles that are wrapped up. So one of the things I'm going to be doing this year is trying to find the particular books that are wrapped up that are on my oldest GoodReads TBR. So that is going to be an interesting sort of like cross-project type of thing happening. So yeah, so that's a fair amount of titles, 25 titles for the list proper, and then there's the additional 8 titles that are prerequisite series rereading. And I can decide that I don't want to read these. I can try them and DNF them. I'm not going to hold myself to finishing all of the titles, but I feel like it's going to be, as of next February, it will have been 10 years. So, Shannon, do you want to read this or not? And I just feel like I should be able to either have read the book or answer the question. That's a little harsh. That's a little harsh. Future Shannon, don't worry so much. It's okay. Don't take the harshness. So that's one of my new projects this year. Another project that I'm doing throughout this year is the Stacking the Series Challenge. And this is a challenge that helps encourage you work through some of the series that you are reading. This is being hosted by Sarah from Steeped in Books over on her GoodReads group, and I will leave the direct link to the particular thread for the Stacking the Series down below if you want to check it out. How it works is you choose how many levels you want to work on, and then you need to read a certain number of books for each of the particular levels. Like for the first level, you read 1 book, and then for level 2, you read 2 books, and then for level 3, you read 3 books, and then for level 4, you read 4 books, and so on and so forth. I have decided to go with 12 levels. So I'm going to be working my way through 12 different series from 12 books in the 12 series, the level 12 series, and then 1 book for the 1 series. And then it comes to a total of 78 books. It's a lot of books. It's a lot of books. So that is my problem. Actually, I think that might be my most ambitious. That or the 40 unwrapped books. One of those two is my most ambitious of the challenges this year. Another one that I'm taking a little more lighter of heart and really just deciding to let this help me help me randomize choices and pick things that I might not necessarily consider. And that is I'm going to be doing 2 A to Z challenges. And I'm going to do this for both graphic novels and for romance novels. And what this is I simply want to read a title from every letter in the alphabet. So 26 graphic novels, 26 romance novels. I think that should be not a huge problem. I've already read 4 graphic novels, so I just set it up in my bullet journal, and there you go. I haven't read any romance yet, but I have read 4 graphic novels, so yay! I've already read some books! Go, Shannon! And the last book-specific, bookish thing of numbers of books that I want to read is all about nonfiction, because I do enjoy nonfiction, and there are particular types of nonfiction that I like, so I want to make sure that I read some books of those categories. So for nonfiction, I want to read at least 10 nonfiction art books. I would like to read at least 5 memoirs. I didn't read tons of memoirs last year, and I really do like them. And then I would also like to read 5 nonfiction books on productivity and practices. So anything about those kinds of things. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of productivity and practices. For me, I'm like, I have it as a shelf on GoodReads. I'm like, doesn't everyone read productivity and practices books? Perhaps not. I don't know. Let me know your favorite productivity and practices books. I really enjoy it as a genre or a subgenre, I guess. Anyway, so that'll be 20 specific nonfiction books or 20 nonfiction books in those particular categories. And so for all of these, I have decided, one of the things I've decided to do this year is I'm not only doing monthly TBRs, but I'm also doing monthly TBR reflections videos. And I think I'm going to include at the end of those how many books I've read for each of the different projects and how I am doing to sort of like a monthly check-in. So I think that will help me keep on track with some of these things and also watch the progress as it goes, because again, achievement-oriented, I love that. So I can cheer if I'm doing well, or if I can notice, maybe not too late, if I'm not doing so great on my different challenges and goals. So those are the different reading goals. I do actually have 2 other things that are non-book specific. I want to also participate in 10 readathons throughout the year. I do really enjoy readathons. They are some of the most fun things to do, not only to create TBRs for, but also I find to find new people here on YouTube. I find it is one of the best ways for me to find people that I haven't seen before and see what they like to read and see what their channel's all about. So I think it's a great way to find and engage with new people, both on YouTube, and also I love doing Twitter sprints for readathons too. That's a lot of fun. That is so much fun. It took me a while to figure that out, which makes me feel old, but let's not go there. But I did eventually figure it out. And then last but not least, I would like to figure out my way of DNFing books. I know a lot of people have what speaks to them in terms of figuring out when they want to say no to a book, that's enough. I don't need you anymore. I don't need you. And I don't know what that is for me. For me, it's not a page number. I don't purely read for enjoyment. So I don't know what it is. I don't know when is the time to say I don't want to finish this book. So that is my one non-tick box goal of the year. And I'm a little worried about it, but I think it's something that I think would be helpful. You know, it's a helpful thing to know. It's a helpful guide mark. That's not a word. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, because I do tend to be someone who just persists or lets it, you know, just not move off my currently reading. And I would like to feel good about the decision and making the decision, whatever it may be. And it might be that I'm just going to finish everything, or it might be something else. I don't know what it is. So everyone has their different like compass point. I do not have the words. I do not know the words to describe what I'm talking about, which is part of the thing. It is part of the thing anyway. So, and if I haven't mentioned this before, I think I mentioned this, but if I haven't mentioned this before, if I read a book that hits more than one of these marks, that's totally fine. I'm counting it for each. If it's an unwrapped book, that's a those books, it gets a tick box in each of the different tick boxes. So this isn't literally like counting up all of these titles numbers, and that'll be how many books I'm aiming to read this year. Although, oddly, if you do add up all of the numbers, it is almost exactly the number of books I read last year, or the number of titles I read last year, which is kind of scary. So I don't know. I don't really have a number goal in terms of overall, because I read, so I'm not worried about reading too much or reading too little, but I would like to have a little more directional reading on some of the things that I've determined that I find exciting or important, like these projects. So that is why I structured it this way. I hope this is interesting. Let me know if it's interesting, and you know, let me know if you like numeric goals and check-ins and these kinds of things, because for me, it really does encourage me, at least at the beginning of the year and when I'm doing well. And not to say that I won't do well, but it's the kind of thing that it can sort of throw you off if you end up not, like, you're not moving towards it. But I'm not gonna worry about that now. And you know, if things change, things change. And if this encourages me to read things that I want to read, that is the whole goal overall. So yeah, so those are all of the projects that I am working on. As I mentioned before, there will be links below to all of the playlists, or the GoodReads shelves, or the GoodReads groups, or the book lists, or all of the lists will be down there. And yeah, so there you go. I hope we all have a great 2019 for both reading and non-reading goals. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.